just can't believe it, guys. I've heard the news. Comics are dead. Like, I've only been doing this channel for 2 months, and I don't mean to sound like every single character in Heroes, but I feel like this was my fault. I feel like me coming on YouTube was the catalyst for this. But because of this, it means there's no more comics, there's no more superheroes. There's never going to be a chance to... Well, it pains me to say there's never going to be a chance that we're going to get that Chuck Dixon Nightwing omnibus.
Tell me how am I supposed to live without you?
Woof woof! Hey Mad Dogs, thank you for watching. Now this video I'm going to be addressing the news that recently came out just yesterday that DC Comics after 25 years has ceased its connections with Diamond Distribution. As much as I was making a little joke at the beginning of this video, I do understand the weight of this situation and the implications that could come as a result of this. Now to address something right out the gate, the title of this video is what does this move mean for the comics industry? And being perfectly honest, I don't know. I don't have any kind of insider knowledge, I can only theorise based off what I've seen. But if we're honest, the internet is a place where people who don't know what they're talking about pretend that they know what they're talking about. I'm just a comics fan like you who likes buying comics, reading comics, talking about comics, and I'm just interested in what this means for the future. I can only really theorise based off what I've seen in the past, so if you were looking for some kind of inside information, this video isn't for you. And I'm going to address this from 4 points. I'm going to look at this from the perspective of Diamond, I'm going to look at this from the perspective of DC, I'm going to look at how it affects us as a consumer, but I'm also going to look at how it affects local comic shops. But for those who don't know, Diamond Distribution is the main comic distribution channel for everyone across most of the continents. So you've got them distributing to America, Canada and the UK in particular. Now there are smaller ones, but for the 3 main markets they do distribute the majority of comics. You've got Marvel Comics going through Diamond, you had DC, you had Image, you had Dark Horse, and effectively Diamond had a monopoly over all of these companies and were the main distributor for comics. So if you had your own comic shop, you would have your own Diamond account, and each month you would order all your comics and they would send it to you. There are a lot of pros and a lot of cons to having one single distributor distributing all the comics across the main channels, and this decision feels like a massive one. It feels like it could be where the tide begins to turn. That could be for the better of comics and that could be for the worse of it. Whether it's going to pan out to be a smart or a stupid decision, I think for the most part it is actually quite brave. 25 years is a significant amount of time, especially with the way that the comics landscape has changed since then. 25 years ago was when we saw the majority of the comics boom, so you did see the death of Superman selling out, you did see X-Men #1 by Jim Lee, you had the Batman Nightfall, you had Marvel selling all the characters to Image, you had the boom of creator-owned works coming into fruition, and that's when Diamond Distribution really got its finger in this pie and became the leader and became the monopoly that we see today. But since then, comics hasn't really seen the same boom that it did back then, even with all these movies now coming out. And I think it deserves a lot of respect for that. You do hear a lot of people slagging off Diamond Comics quite often, but I think we have to give them credit for what they've actually done. Particularly in the UK, I don't think we'd even have the majority of comic shops that we did if it wasn't for them being this one channel shipping things across. It helped everyone across here save on postage, and it managed to get a lot of collector's editions across to us. Now I know that Penguin and Hatchet do a lot of the collected editions here in the UK, but there's got to be some kind of agreement between them and between Diamond to get that in effect in the first place. So the first perspective we're going to consider is Diamond Distribution. And it's a weird one to have to look at because we don't actually know the impact that this will have on Diamond as a whole. I genuinely believe that now it's more risky for DC to sever connections with Diamond than it is for Diamond to sever them with DC. Effectively, Diamond is still near enough the life support for comics across the majority of the globe. And this is the problem with a monopoly, but without Diamond at the moment, a lot of these comic shops would actually already be closed. But having a look at the sales figures, DC is one of their comic brands that does often reach into their top 10s. You've got big names like Batman, Superman, all the crises that are going to happen, you've got Wonder Woman, you've got the repertoire of back issues and the collected editions, you know, Watchmen's with DC, all the Vertigo titles, although that's DC Black Label now. You've got Kingdom Come, you've got Batman the Killing Joke, you've got All-Star Superman, you've got every Justice League title that's going to exist. By having Diamond lose them, it is going to be a massive loss to the company as a whole. But is it something that's actually going to sink Diamond in general? I don't really know. When I read the press release, one of the deciding factors that made DC do this was said that they've got stagnant market growth over the last couple of years. Now what they're planning on doing to change that, I don't know, but to me that sounds like DC actually thinks Diamond is the reason why DC hasn't grown the market share, rather than looking at the issues that DC DC has as a whole. So we're naturally going into it, but looking at DC Comics and what this means for them in this move that they've made, I think it's something that they genuinely feel is the right move from them, regardless of our gut reaction to it. Now the thing that's making me laugh is that I've seen a lot of people over the last couple of years saying that Diamond is the problem with comics and that's the reason why comics are dying in general. I don't think it's too fair to blame everything on them, but I do actually think there is quite a lot of validity in that statement. Comics are now only really purchasable from comic shops directly. You never really see it so that comics are in little shops or you see them in bookshops. It's always that you have to go directly to that comic shop or online. Now when looking at that comic that DC made about the stagnant market growth, this might actually be what they're talking about and they might have some kind of solution for it. Like, as much as it pains us comic fans to say, how many people walk into a comic shop, pick up a comic and then get addicted to it? The main issue that DC is going to have a result of this is going to be their collected editions, because that's where the majority of their money probably comes from. We can all agree to this, and just by looking behind me, people would rather to have that nice collected edition, some kind of hardback, than 100 floppy issues that they might just end up putting in a loft. And admittedly, recently we saw that once the pandemic scare had happened and Diamond had announced that they were closing their warehouses, DC was really quick to locate those alternate sources. So they found Midtown Comics, and there was another one that they had that I just can't remember off the top of my head, but they effectively stepped up as their distributors during the time when Diamond wasn't operating. Although I think this move in general might work out well for DC, I think it's very stupid of them to go with another retailer to effectively become their distributor. Midtown Comics is already a shop, it's already got their best interests, it's already got their profit margins, so realistically, why would Midtown Comics sell something to another comic shop for the same price or try to offer a discount, which would be to the detriment of their own shop? I think it'd be in DC's better interest to locate a different distributor altogether. Don't go with a retailer because it just doesn't make sense. But I think from looking at DC's reaction as soon as the pandemic happened, it shows that they were already trying to have these plans in place for a while. Even though it's come as a surprise to all of us, I don't think they've taken this decision lightly. I said that before and I'll say it again because I do agree with it. That was the one part of their statement that did actually make sense. I can't imagine that they just woke up and they were so fed up with Diamond distribution that they just decided to cut ties then and there. They've had to have these plans in place for a while, and I think if anything they were going to announce it, rolled it out a little bit sooner when the pandemic happened, and now they've already shown the hand and they've got to kind of stick with it. I'm not gonna lie, if I was DC Comics I would not expect that last shipment from Diamond to have any kind of good quality control going on. That box is going to be beat up, there's not going to be any packaging in it at all. Like, why would they care? It's like when it's your last day at your job and you just want to tell all your customers to go away and fuck off. Now the most important angle for myself and people who are watching this as well is likely for us, the consumers. What does this move mean for us? Now I think if you're in the US you're likely going to be safe because DC's going to have some kind of program so that they can get comics shipped out to you, and they're actually going to be shipped out earlier. DC Comics are now going to start selling them on a Tuesday rather than a Wednesday, and realistically I don't get why that's a valid argument. Comic collectors, and when I brought single issues, we enjoy going on one day and getting all of our comics in one go. They're not going to want to go on Tuesday to get the DC comics and then go on Wednesday to get the rest of them. For a lot of people who don't have a comic shop near them, they only go once a month, so I don't really get why they're acting like that's some kind of edge that they've got over the rest of the industry. But unfortunately, if you're outside of the US, at least for the short term, I think this is going to cause more problems for you than it would solutions. I don't have a Diamond account, and that's the only way that we can really get any information on what it's like to be a part of that scheme. But from what I've already heard from comic shops in Canada, it sounds like the postage cost alone to get the new comics across to them costs more than the actual profit that they'd make from the books that they'd sell. Comics make barely any profit as it is already, so factoring in those postage costs just means that the cost of comics are going to go up if you're not in the US. It might even be the same in the US, I don't entirely know. But one thing that's particularly worrying is in the UK. Now we have Diamond UK, and I don't know if they're just going to still have some kind of link with them, but it sounds like they severed all ties with Diamond. But we don't have Midtown Comics over here, we don't even know who the other distribution stream is. And it's not likely the case that whoever does become the distribution stream can offer the same kind of postage deals that they could with Diamond. Because Diamond was one place and it was sending all the comics from that one warehouse to just one other comic shop, it did mean that there was a reduction on postage costs. In the UK in particular, I think we're either going to see a complete lack of DC Comics or there's going to be a steep increase in the price. And that might be the same for people in other territories as well. Now the one that really concerns me is the collected editions. I mentioned this with DC and how that affects them and how it affects Diamonds, but realistically we are collectors. We love these collected editions, we look forward to them. That's why we make these lists, that's why I've got this channel now. It's because we want those products in those nice formats. And when I started collecting comics in about 2005, 2006, comics seemed expensive then, but they've only got more expensive since that. You can even see with books that get reprinted. Have a look at how much Absolute Batman Hush cost when it originally came out in 2005 compared to when it got reprinted in about 2017. I genuinely remember getting that from Forbidden Planet from their online shop for less than £30, whereas now you're lucky if you can find it for less than £60. So comics have already seen a steep increase in the price, but that's natural with the rate of inflation. With this, and depending on how difficult the ordering system is to get those collected editions, it might mean that we don't even get a lot of DC books coming across to us. And that's going to have a knock-on effect on the numbers of sales, which means it'll have a knock-on effect on the number of collected editions that DC actually decides to make. Now let's just be honest anyway, DC are not good at making decisions when it comes to their collected editions. I don't know who that department is, but they clearly do not know what the fans want. Like, how many times are they going to change that logo? Like, yesterday, actually I'm going to go into mid-rant. So yesterday I got the 2 volumes of Hawkman by Geoff Johns delivered to me because the omnibus is out of print. Fair enough, they've still got it in a readily available format and it's quite easy, but this is 2 volumes and they knew from the beginning it was going to be 2 volumes and the spines still do not line up. What's that about? These came out quite shortly after one another anyway. I'm being honest, I don't think that added anything to my point, but I am kind of glad that I got it off my chest. But my point is that DC at the moment doesn't seem to have any kind of consideration for their consumer. These decisions do seem to be made in the name of profit rather than what the actual consumer wants. And the problem is you're not going to see a profit if you don't give the consumer things that they actually want to buy. Because for myself, a lot of my collected editions, I get them because I can get them from sources other than a comic shop. So I do get them from Amazon, I do get them from Books, etc., Book Depository. But now that entire dynamic might change because there's someone else involved in the party that doesn't actually know what to do. For us as the consumer, I think there's a lot of teething problems that are going to come as a result of this that we have to be aware of and we have to prepare for. Particularly in the UK and Europe, it might be the case that we end up having to buy books from the US just to get them across here. Those 50% discounts that we were seeing on websites when they first came out, I don't think we're going to see a lot of them anymore, which is disappointing. There were a lot of big DC books that were already solicited that I was looking forward to that I'm not sure if I'm going to get now. If it comes to a point where we have to pay retail, I can't feasibly afford to pay 120 quid every time I want one of these omnibuses. It might even be the point that I just can't justify that price. It might just be pricing out their own fans. As much as it pains me to say, that might end up being the case. And finally, I'm going to talk about comic shops because it seems like that's the thing that no one considers until the very end anyway. It's a shame and I genuinely feel sorry for anybody who does have their own comic shop, and if you're watching this, I offer my support to you 100%. If you've got one, feel free to leave something in the comments below and I'll make sure I promote you as much as I can. Even though, let's be honest, this channel doesn't really get a lot of views. But let's be realistic, us as a consumer, we're going to find something else to buy. DC Comics are going to be fine if this falls through. Diamond Distribution are going to be fine if this falls through. But a lot of comic shops are already in a state of slow decay anyway. It's been happening for years because fewer people are going in, the price of comics are going up, and even though all these movies are coming out and everybody loves Marvel now, they don't actually translate into buying comics. But a lot of comic shops have stuck to the guns, and yeah, they might have to do different things, like my Forbidden Planet is now basically a Funko Pop shop that features comics rather than a comic shop. And they've had to do that to survive, and I respect them just for still being there. But this decision that DC has made could not have come at a worse time for comic shops. A lot of comic shops in the US have already had to close, whether that be temporary or permanent, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And then they're struggling to get stock in, they're struggling to get people through the door, and now they're going to have to lose their profit to go with this other distributor that DC have now decided that they just want to go through, and not really given any real reason as to why they've done it. Those postage costs, like we were talking about, are going to massively cut into the slim profit that comic shops got anyway. And a lot of comic shops are either going to have to decide between not buying DC Comics at all or effectively losing out on profit. And if it comes to that, I think they're going to choose the former and they're just not going to sell DC Comics. In which case it begs the question, what was the point in them doing this in the first place? If DC were doing it just so that they can get a bigger slice of the profit, then it's not going to work because they're going to lose out on money that they had anyway. I've always said that it's better to have 50% of 1,000 than 100% of 100. Because yeah, they probably gained a greater percentage of their ownership as a result of this, but they've lost out on the fan base that gave them that ownership in the first place. So that's all I've really got to say about it, and being honest, DC hasn't really had the greatest record of making good decisions, whether that be with the DCEU or with the comics themselves, with the collected editions, or how they handle the characters. But I think one thing that we need to get clear on and we need to kind of calm down about is the fact that comics aren't going to die as a result of this. I've heard that so many times, and most of the people that are complaining that comics are going to die were probably the same ones that said that we need somebody that's not monopolising the entire comics industry. People wanted a drastic shift in this, and it might be that DC actually listened to that. It'd be the first time they've listened in general, but who knows? So I think as a consumer, I know it's difficult if you're a comic shop, and like I said, I give my full support to anybody who's in that situation. But But as a consumer, I think we need to just calm down and see what happens, you know, a year or two from now. Because we're acting like this is the end of the world, but if this massively backfires for DC, which I think it has the potential to do, DC can always go back to Diamond. Yeah, it is going to be kind of them crawling back with a tail between their legs, but at the end of the day, if that's what's going to be best for their industry, they can do that. And I'm sure Diamond would help them out again and things would get back to normal. But comics aren't going to go anywhere. We've still got a devoted and passionate fan base, so of course there's going to be something that will fuel it further. People thought comics were dead in the 90s where all those publicity stunts were happening, like killing Superman or breaking Batman's back, or Catwolf, but I also thought that was kind of cool in a way. I remember when the New 52 came out and people thought that was going to be the death of comics, but a few years down the line they just reverted back to the old timeline. My only hope for this entire situation, and hopefully you carry it as well, is that if DC genuinely thinks they know what they're doing, they might have a way to actually increase their market share like they said from the beginning. So they might find a way to branch into supermarkets and other shops and bookshops in general so that DC Comics can be there, whereas they wouldn't just be in a comic shop before. If that's the case, then it might actually benefit everybody except for Diamond in this situation. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. You're either going to see other comic publishers following in the same footsteps, so you might see Marvel doing the same thing, Image might follow suit, or it might be the case that 2 years from now DC gets back with Diamond and we're all worried for nothing. But I do understand that this is uncharted territory, and for me, there was comics before Diamond distribution, there was comics during, and there will be comics after. So I think what we're best off doing is calming down, seeing what we can do to support our local comic shops, and actually hope for the best. We never know, this might be a good thing for comics in general. I'm not guaranteeing it, and if you asked me to put a percentage on it, I'd say it's about 30. But as comic fans and people who are passionate about the medium, I think all we can do is look forward to the next book, still enjoy reading it, and do what we can to support this industry. If you want to completely write DC Comics off as a result of this, I understand. I think it might be a bit short-sighted when we don't really know what the longevity of this situation is, but I respect if that's what you want to do. The bottom line for me as a consumer is whoever makes the best books are the ones that I'm going to buy. But it's best that we stay vocal about this so DC knows exactly how we feel so that they can address those concerns. And if one of the 3 people who happen to watch this video happen to be from DC Comics, can you tell me what's going to happen to comics in the UK? Because that's something that's concerning me. But comment below and let me know what your reaction to all this situation is. And subscribe if you haven't already. I'm really close to 100 subscribers, and that's when I'm going to do like my comic room tour. Please check out one of my other videos because it does help the channel, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and if you didn't like it, why did you get this far? But keep reading and make sure you stay safe, all you mad dogs, and I'll see you at the next video.